Everyone. Um, Today I want to talk about something. I want to talk about perspective. But first, I want to say that some of you probably don't know. Well, a lot of you don't know that one of my favorite books, musicals book, is Les Mis by Victor Hugo, and then the subsequent musical is by far one of my favorites. And while I was in Georgia, I shared that love with a lady in the church, and we went to Les Mis with her and her husband at the local community theater and in Dothan, Alabama, and saw it. It was fantastic. But she also gave me this book, 52 Little Lessons from Les Mis. It's absolutely wonderful. If you've ever seen it or read it, Les Mis is one of the most moving pieces of literature, of art, and it always gets me, no matter how many times I've seen it or read it. But there's a character in Les Mis. His name is Gavroche, and he's the little boy who, in the second act, is a bright star. In the musical, especially the one that we've seen, the filmed one with Anne Hathaway and Gerard Butler, what you don't know is you miss is when you read Victor Hugo's book, Gavroche is actually the Thénardier's, I have to remember how to say it, the Thénardier's son. So the people who are looking after Casine, the evil, awful, terrible people who run the crooked bar and hotel, they're actually Gavroche's parents. And if you've read it or seen it, you know that Gavroche is different than his parents. He's a little street urchin, but he has this joy in life. And I want to share with you what Bob Welch says about Gavroche. Perspective. Though their circumstances are similar, their ways of looking at the world are totally different. To wit, Gavroche looks at life as an adventure. Gavroche doesn't see a world of poverty, he sees a world of freedom and possibility. When two interlopers get into a fight, he observes with intrigue he was, writes Hugo, having a marvelous time. He does not slip into self-pity, is not obsessed with the idea that he needs more and more and more to be happy because he already is, even if he lives inside a giant statue of an elephant. In real life, shortly after the turn of the 19th century, Napoleon hatched plans to have the elephant built to honor himself, though only a plaster model was in place at the time he lost the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. He values people, quite the opposite of his parents. He bore no ill will to anybody, Hugo writes. His parents are jealous of Jean Valjean and the wealth he's accumulated. Meanwhile, Gavroche discovers two hungry, abandoned children. He gets them food, not even realizing they are his younger brothers. If I had children, he says, I would take better care of them than that. Later, he gives his own clothes to help a homeless woman survive a night's bitter cold. Gavroche laughs at life. When the sky opens up to rain, he says, if this continues, I withdraw my subscription. He notices what is going on around him. It is Gavroche who, amid the street battle, realizes that Javert has sneaked through the lines and is disguised to spy on the student revolution. He finds purpose. When he joins forces with the young revolutionaries, Gavroche sees himself as a smaller part of a greater good, is content with who he is, thus sees no need, unlike his parents, to deceive. Gavroche is an inspiration, and I think in times like these and in just our daily lives in general, what is it that drives us? Is it the need for more, or is it simply finding a new perspective to look at? We can wallow in self-pity, we can bemoan, we can cry, we can fall into those ways, or we can flip the perspective and look at the things in a new light. I think that comes with faith, that we can look at all the things that happen as gifts, find ways to see God in the midst of them. And they're trying times, there's struggles, there's hardship, there's all those, but if we find and seek to see God and we flip the perspective in the midst of that, they become gifts. Even the hardest times become gifts, and we can stand firm in our faith. Bob Welch, or Bob Welsh writes about a friend. I once wrote about a young man who told me, I don't have a single happy childhood memory. He was beaten by his mother's boyfriends, thrown into a lake to learn to swim, punched by one of those boyfriends when he caught the man cheating at Monopoly, had his dog thrown against a wall. It did not help that he was discriminated against because of his ethnicity. His mother was white, his father was African American and Native American. And yet he grew up to be a first-rate father himself, a great husband, and to me, a wonderful friend. Certainly his faith had much to do with that, but I've seen plenty of people who claimed faith in God, yet who, even with happy childhood, lived mire and bitterness and regret. He excelled for many of the reasons Gavroche excels, because he's a survivor, because he refuses to let circumstances define who he is, and finally because he holds the perspective that it isn't about him. The perspective that it isn't about him. When we hold the perspective that it's about God and what God is doing in and through us, it changes how we act, how we see the world. I pray that we all have perspective shifts to find God in the best and even in the worst, so we can live lives like little Gavroche and Les Mis.